Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how you doing?
I am doing really pretty good. It's rainy here, a little warm and rainy.
Yep, it's been that way for a couple days.
It has.
Our friends to the north have been suffering badly from tornadoes, so if you have been affected, my heart goes out to you.
You're in the Midwest. We know how to deal with that now, don't we? Well, I got a case for you today.
All
Speaking of the Midwest, here we go. You ready?
Yep, let's go.
On Friday, July 25th, 2002, Ernie Williamson wakes up to the alarm right around 6 or 6:30 in the morning as he's preparing to head to work. As he starts his day, his 6-year-old daughter, Cassandra, affectionately known as Casey, approaches him, telling him she's hungry. It's time for breakfast, Dad. Ernie assures her that he'll quickly take a shower and then take her across the street to grab breakfast. Since Ernie and his wife, Angela, had separated, the couple still wanted to raise their children in a loving co-parenting relationship. Chelsea, age 12, Casey, age 6, Elizabeth, age 4, and little baby Ernie, age 2, were actually staying across the street with Angela's father on Benton Street in Valley Park, Missouri. So it's a little neighborhood, and, Ernie lives across the street from Angela. Angela lives with her dad, and so the kids can bounce back and forth. I love that. I think that's amazing. As Ernie gets ready, he has no worries since a family friend, 24-year-old Johnny Johnson, is still asleep on the couch about leaving little Casey out and about in the house. Now, both Angela and Ernie have known Johnson since he was a child. However, upon finishing up his shower and returning upstairs for Casey, he discovers that she is nowhere to be found inside the home. Casey is missing. Now, at this point, Ernie, he's not alarmed. He thinks maybe that Johnny had taken Casey to the store to get some food because, she did say that she was hungry. So Ernie makes his way to the store that was basically right down the street. Neither Johnson or little Casey were at the store or had even been there. Ernie then goes back and wakes up Angie. At this point, it's about 7:15 in the morning, telling her that Casey is missing. They go out to search both homes and around the house outside, but still, Casey is nowhere to be found. They reach out to some relatives who tell them that no, they haven't seen Casey. Frantically, they call the police. When police arrive on site, Ernie explains that not only is Casey missing at this point, but Johnny Johnson, who had stayed the night with him the previous night, is gone as well. A search party consisting of police as well as friends and neighbors begins around the area. A man by the name of Louis Barnhart approaches officers and informs them that just that very morning, he had witnessed a man at 6th Street and St. Louis Avenue carrying a little girl on his back, like piggyback style.
Right.
Now, Casey's older sister, 12-year-old Chelsea, and her friend Angel decide to set out on their bikes to help search for Casey. While they're out riding around, Angel spots Johnson walking back to Benton Street. She stops him and inquires about Casey's whereabouts. Johnson responds that he doesn't know. Doesn't know.
Strange.
Okay. Sensing that something's amiss, even a little 12-year-old can see that something's not quite right. Angel heads back and she tells a police officer about this encounter.
Good for her.
As Johnson approaches the scene, Officer Chad Lewis swiftly approaches him. Johnson greets the officer, stating, quote, "I hear you're looking for me." Since there were so many people around and feeling that things were more than a bit suspicious at this point, Officer Lewis puts Johnson in the back of a squad car. With Johnson in the car, the officer checks with Louis Barnhart to confirm if Johnson was the individual he had seen earlier. and Barnhart affirmed that yes, it was indeed him. Once inside the patrol car, Johnson told the officer that he posed no threat to, quote, little kids, expressing fondness for them because, he had a child of his own. He offered this tidbit of information up out of the blue, by the way. He told Officer Lewis that, he was wet. He was wet. His clothing was wet because he went for a swim in the nearby river. And that was the Merrimack River. And this was just part of his routine. Now, mind you, Johnny Johnson offered this up without being asked. Okay.
It's not suspicious at all.
Officer Lewis found Johnson's path peculiar, as locals typically travel from the area that he claimed he was in to reach the river, and he gave a whole different direction of what he did. Upon questioning, Johnson denied entering that area the way that the officer had said most people do. Eventually, Johnson agreed to accompany him to the police station for an interview. Johnny Johnson has not had an easy life. In fact, it was plagued by mental illness and drug abuse. Johnny's brother Eric was diagnosed with schizophrenia, indicating a genetic predisposition towards severe mental health in the family. Additionally, Johnny's maternal grandfather's history of spending time in a mental hospital also highlights the pattern of mental health challenges the family had. Johnny's life had been shaped by a series of challenges, including early trauma, academic struggles, mental health issues, and obviously a family history of mental illness. When Johnny was 4 years old, his mother's boyfriend tried to drown him, and a neighbor sexually abused him. Right around 3 years old, Johnny suffered a head trauma and had to require stitches. It was a pretty good little injury. At school, his academic issues start off pretty tough from the get-go. He failed kindergarten, and then he also failed first grade. Wow. At this point, he started urinating himself at school, which of course caused a lot of shame, embarrassment, and bullying.
Which should have been caught. Something's
amiss.
Exactly. Somebody of authority should have caught that. All right.
This issue, by the way, would plague him his entire life. He would wet his pants. Johnny is again sexually abused around age 9 or 10, and it's here that Johnny starts drinking alcohol for the first time at age 9 or 10. Can you imagine? Throughout middle school,
yep,
it's terrible. Throughout middle school, Johnny continues to deal with learning disabilities. His academic struggles are exacerbated by the nonstop teasing from peers about both his appearance as well as his learning disability. Kids are so cruel, I swear. As a result, Johnny finds himself repeating even more grades, making his social isolation severe. He's not fitting in with anybody.
No, he can't. He's too old for most classrooms, right?
And just those middle school kids are rough, let me tell you. In 7th grade, Johnny expresses thoughts of wanting to die at that young age. This would end up having him hospitalized. He refrains from acting on these thoughts due to his fear of going to hell at this point. Now, shortly after turning 13, Johnny witnesses his grandfather's death from a heart attack. And this led to severe distress, obviously. And this would be yet another admission to a mental hospital for care. At this time, his alcohol and drug abuse is amping up, and he reports that he is now having hallucinations. Once again, at this point, he's sexually abused by a neighbor.
Jesus.
Johnny turns 14 years old, and it's shortly after this that he makes his first suicide attempt by cutting his wrists, which earns him yet another trip to a mental hospital for care. Once he's discharged, he immediately goes home, overdoses, and is readmitted. At this point, he is diagnosed with major depression. At 16 years old, Johnny gets in trouble at school for bringing a knife, leading him to the juvenile court to place him on probation. In an effort to provide him with a positive role model, they send him to live with his father, who, at this point, was very ill with diabetes, and in fact, he had to have his foot amputated. Now, at this point in time, Johnny is diagnosed with PTSD, and he stops going to school altogether. Due to his truancy, he is forced to move back in with his mother, where his drug use escalates to LSD. Johnny starts cutting himself and dives deeper into his suicidal ideation. At 17 years old, Johnny begins to report hearing voices. By the time he turns 18, he has already cycled through 9 different homes, having no consistent supervision from an adult figure who could maybe offer him a little stability and guidance in life. I can't imagine. 18, 9 different homes. Continuing to struggle with alcohol and drug abuse, as well as ongoing depression, Johnny makes another attempt on his life. This triggers a cycle of hospitalizations as he moves in and out of the medical facilities in search of support and treatment. With nowhere to go, and frankly, no one to support him, Johnny starts living on the streets from age 18 to 22. He would find friends to do drugs with, and then he started to rack up some various criminal charges. Nothing huge, but, pretty much what a kid living on the street with no job might rack up. While he's living on the streets, he meets a woman named Lisa. The two of them hit it off over their shared love of drugs, but soon Lisa is pregnant. Following his probation violation in 2001, Johnson was admitted to the St. Louis State Hospital. Now, if you're from this area, you might be familiar with this in South City. It was on the same, I guess you would say, campus as Malcolm Bliss. Remember the old Malcolm Bliss?
I lived right near it, 3 or 4 blocks away. Yep.
So all of that's torn down. I went down that rabbit hole, researching all of that, found all the history, and then I was like, okay, focus, Camille, go back to what you're doing. It was there, psychiatrist Dr. John Rabin conducted an evaluation, which included a court-ordered risk assessment regarding Johnson's violence and his propensity for it. The doctor's report went to the court and highlighted various factors, including that Johnson could present an unacceptable risk of violence in certain circumstances. To mitigate this risk, it was recommended that Johnson adhere to medication, maintain a stable living condition, and abstain from drugs and alcohol. All of that, as we know, is easier said than done, especially when you don't have anywhere to go. Johnson remained in the psychiatric rehab center until mid-January 2002. Upon his release, he returned to his grandmother's residence in Kirkwood, where he resided with his grandmother, Lily Owens, and his girlfriend, Lisa, and their baby son. Initially, things were going pretty smoothly for about 6 months until Johnson stopped taking his medication, and that was in late June 2002. This brings us up to the day of the crime. It's around 8:30 a.m. back at Benton Street, where Johnson was informed of his rights and said he understood them, and while en route to the police station for an interview, he starts talking. He expresses his desire to provide a statement. Okay, because, they have, at this point, they have some cameras going and some audio and things like that. The police interview with Johnny Johnson started at 9:20 a.m. Now, initially, Johnson said that he had no involvement with Casey and her disappearance. However, when the detective started to try a different approach, you know how they do that to get information, he managed to strike a chord with Johnson. Mentioning a hypothetical scenario about Johnson's own son being missing, Johnson's demeanor turned hostile. He then disclosed that he was undergoing treatment for schizophrenia and he had been hospitalized for it previously. At this point, he denied experiencing auditory hallucinations, but he admitted to occasionally seeing shadows. Johnson added that he hadn't taken his medication for a month, and he claimed not to be currently affected by schizophrenia. Yeah, I don't think that's how that works, Johnny.
No.
And that's the problem with a lot of mental illness. They get better, they feel better, they stop taking it. Well,
right.
That's only working because you're taking
exactly.
it. Mm-hmm. The detectives take a break from the interrogation, and they provided Johnson with some food. As the interrogation starts back up at around 1:30 in the afternoon, Johnson consented to undergo a rape kit examination. But something happened before the rape kit could be done. With a little nudging, Detective Neske urged Johnson to come out with the truth. Quote, "You need to do the right thing. You need to be a man and tell me where she's at. We can help you. Tell us where she's at." When asked if Casey was still alive, Johnson admitted that she was deceased and stated it was just an accident. He then recounted that Casey had accompanied him to the glass factory, and while he was there, he climbed in the pit wall and a rock dislodged and struck Casey's head, killing her. Johnson described feeling overwhelmed and fearing that he wouldn't be believed. He buried Casey's body. He then told officers that he attempted to end his own life in the river by drowning himself, but he couldn't go through with it. Now, I want to point out here the glass factory is pretty much like in a building, abandoned concrete, like shell. It was like an old building.
Mm-hmm.
Johnson then drew a map to aid officers in locating little Casey's remains, but they were unsuccessful in finding her. So Johnson was then taken to the site himself to show them. However, before they arrived with Johnson, a person that was with the search party looking for Casey had found her first. Upon their arrival, the police swiftly secured the pit, which was inside the glass factory. It was like a little divot in the ground. Well, I guess it's bigger than a divot. While at the site, Detective Neske talked with the evidence officer on site, who informed the detective that there was no feasible way to climb out of the pit and that there was substantial amount of blood covering the pit's floor. This meant Johnson was lying about what happened. Okay, Jen, I took your advice and started using sleep cream.
Yay, good for you.
And I am telling you, I have been sleeping like a baby. I would have never guessed it would work better than any of the other sleep remedies I've tried over the years, like the over-the-counter drugs and melatonin. But I am telling you, since adding it to my nighttime routine, I have been getting a solid night's sleep every night.
I know. I'm a huge fan of sleep cream. Last night, I got 8.5 hours sleep, and that's unheard of because you know I've had problems for the past few years sleeping, and nothing has helped like this topical cream. I mean, I just put it on my neck, and before you know it, I'm falling asleep. I'm getting really sleepy. And even better, I don't wake up with that cloudy brain like I did with the over-the-counter drugs. And I hated that. But I love that instead of using the sedatives and the harmful additives, Sleep Cream's key ingredient is CBD plus organic oils and plant extracts. Plus, the light scent of lavender helps calm my nerves.
I absolutely love the smell. Now, if you're worried out there about THC, let me tell you, you don't need to worry. Sleep Cream doesn't contain THC, so it won't cause a high or trigger a failed drug test. The CBD will help your mind and your body relax so you can have a restful night's sleep. So if you're not sleeping 7 or 8 hours a night, you must go to sleepcream.com and try the original and finest CBD sleep topical on the market today. If you don't experience better sleep, they will refund your money. So, what do you have to lose except another night of amazing rest? Order your bottle at sleepcream, that's CREME.com today.
Seriously, go now. Go and order your bottle at sleepcreme.com. You deserve a good night's rest.
Detective Neske goes back to talk with Johnson, telling him he'd been to the scene and, I don't think it's an accident. It didn't take long for Johnson to crack. Johnson told the detectives exactly what happened. Around 8:30 p.m. that night, Johnson repeated this version of the events in an audio-taped statement. This is what happened on the last day of little 6-year-old Casey Williamson's short life.
I'm not sure if I'm ready to hear this, but I'll brace myself.
It's horrible.
Always is.
On that morning, Casey did not stay upstairs as her father had instructed her to do. Instead, she ventured downstairs where she found Johnson sleeping on the couch. Casey turned on the TV and sat down in front of the TV to watch, just as little kids do. Johnson woke up to her there, right in front of him, and it hit him. This is my opportunity to do what he wanted to do, which was, quote, have sex with her.
She's 6.
Johnson asked the 6-year-old if she wanted to go to the glass factory to play some games. And just like any happy 6-year-old, heck yeah, she was excited to go play some games. Wearing only her nightgown and underpants, Johnson took Casey and left the home. As they made their way down the street, they ditched back into an alley. The little girl told Johnson that her feet hurt, so Johnson picked her up. That's when the witness saw her getting a piggyback ride from Johnson. As they reached the woods leading to the glass factory, they followed one of the paths to a sunken pit surrounded by brick and concrete walls towering over 6 feet high. Johnson and Casey crawled through a small tunnel and descended into the pit. What happens next is brutal, and I want to warn you, it is graphic. I've omitted certain details because, frankly, you just don't need to hear it. You can guess, and trust me, you just don't want to hear it.
I don't even want to guess.
Once inside the enclosed concrete structure, Johnson asked Casey if she wanted to see his penis. Casey said no, but he pulled down his shorts and exposed himself. The little girl turned her head away. Johnson then asked Casey to pull down her underwear so that he could see her. Johnson said this caused the sweet baby to start, quote, freaking out, and she said she would tell her parents. Because of this, Johnson then said this caused him to start freaking out as well. Casey was adamant and said no, and Johnson grabbed her underwear and tore it off, forcing her to the ground. Johnson pinned Casey to the ground with his chest, prompting her to scream and struggle. She kicked, pushed at Johnson, and scratched his chest in an attempt to defend herself and escape. That little girl is so brave and amazing.
She fought just like she's supposed to. Yeah.
It was at this point Johnson decided to kill her. He reached for a brick and hit Casey in the head with it at least 6 times. Casey did not pass out and managed to get up and run, but there was nowhere to go. Johnson hit her with the brick again and again. She fell to her knees and tried to crawl away from Johnson, but he had fractured her skull. Still, she was alive. Johnson then took a rock roughly the size of a basketball, where he brought it down on the back of Casey's head and neck, causing multiple skull fractures. Casey began breathing rapidly, then suddenly ceased breathing altogether. In a panic, Johnson took Casey's underwear and wiped off the blood from Casey's face, tossing the underwear into a hole in the concrete wall. Johnson then took some dirt, leaves, and sticks and tried to bury Casey. After finishing, he made his way to the Merrimack River, which was nearby, and this was basically an attempt to wash away Casey's blood as well as any other evidence he had on him. Johnson did not admit that he intended to take Casey, rape her, or kill her prior to entering the pit. Now, it's important to note here that on the preceding day, January 25th, Johnson had actually stayed the night, and Angie woke up to discover Casey on the couch watching cartoons with Johnson. Johnson reassured Angie that Casey wasn't causing any trouble. However, unbeknownst to anyone at that moment, Johnson had started to find Casey, quote, cute, and had, quote, ideas of wanting to have sex with her. This family trusted this man with their family, with their little kids. Later that evening, around 11:30 p.m., Detective John Newsom received orders to transport Johnson to the county jail. While Johnson awaited processing, the detective started chatting him up about reading and what kind of books did he like to read. Johnson mentioned his fondness for reading the Bible and expressed concern about his, quote, eternal salvation. He stated that he was okay with the situation and even expressed a desire for the death penalty, believing he deserved it. Curiously, he asked the detective whether achieving eternal salvation was possible for him with what he'd just done. Sensing that something was up with these comments, the detective kind of saw an opportunity here. And he thought maybe Johnson may have been a little bit more than dishonest earlier. So the detective told him that he had to completely be truthful to attain forgiveness. Bam, it worked. Johnson confessed that he had lied. Johnson was taken back to the police headquarters where he once again waived his rights and provided a verbal and audio-taped statement. During the tape portion of the interview, this occurred. Detective Newsham, okay, and you told me over there that when you had made up your mind for this, you were afraid that you could be caught, that she was going to tell somebody, correct? Johnny, yes. The detective, okay, and what was your plan once you had finished having vaginal sex with her? Johnny, to kill her. The detective, okay, and you knew that you were going to do that, correct? Finally, Johnny Johnson admitted that he took Casey for the sole purpose of having, quote, sex with her. And mind you, these are his words, not mine, and that he had planned to kill her after doing so. He had maintained that that was never the case all throughout all these interviews. He finally admitted the truth.
Lord have mercy.
Johnny returns to the jail at about 1:10 a.m., where he is taken into custody and booked. The autopsy findings confirmed that Casey's cause of death was blunt force trauma to her head, which caused skull fractures and bruising on her scalp and brain. Additionally, she sustained injuries to her arms, shoulders, leg, and back. Crucially, blood evidence linking Casey to Johnson was found on his shirt, as well as the brick and large rock that was still in the pit and that the police had recovered. St. Louis County jail psychologist Dr. Karen Cotton-Willigore assessed Johnson on July 29, 2002, following his arrest, and concluded that he should be placed in the psychiatric infirmary. The doctor had evaluated Johnson before in August 2001, during which she diagnosed him with schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, borderline personality disorder. Johnson admitted that what he had done was, quote, very, very wrong. He also asserted to her that his mental illness was not a factor in the crime, but said he didn't know why he had killed Casey. After examining him, the doctor expressed concern that these conditions could lead to emotional instability, potential suicidal tendencies, and a risk of decompensation into psychosis, and he should be in a hospital, not a jail cell.
A hospital jail cell, maybe.
During the trial, Johnson did not contest the fact that he killed Casey, but he argued against premeditation. His defense of diminished capacity claimed that he couldn't have premeditated due to his mental illness, specifically schizoaffective disorder, which led to command his hallucinations at the time, urging him to assault and murder Casey. In response, the state's expert countered, asserting that Johnson was indeed capable of premeditation. I agree. Any hallucinations he expressed or experienced, the expert argued, were a result of methamphetamine intoxication rather than psychosis. He was doing street drugs and not taking his real drugs at that time. Forensic psychologist Dr. Delaney Dean testified for the defense regarding Johnson's mental condition at the time of the crime. After reviewing over 2,000 pages of records, as well as speaking with Johnson's family, she administered a series of psychological tests to Johnson, which diagnosed him with a very, very depressive disorder. After referring to all the doctors who had seen Johnson over the years, in which he had been diagnosed as schizophrenic with major depression and psychotic features and schizoaffective disorder, she testified that Johnny's behavior prior to killing Casey indicates lack of cool reflection. I think you say, what's cool reflection? Yeah, I had to look it up.
Yeah, I was going to say.
These are fancy doctor words. Quote, lack of cool reflection is taking a child in her nightgown, barefoot, and putting her up on your shoulders and walking in public quite a long distance in daylight where anybody could see you. The doctor went on to mention that when Johnson returned to the area of the home after the crime of killing Casey, he also demonstrated a lack of cool reflection. Quote, this is a subsequent behavior that shows to me a lack of genuine understanding of what he had done, even though he had become tearful, he had tried to clean himself up, and he was so out of it mentally that he walked soaking wet in public to the crime scene, as it were directly right there in front of the crime victim's house, where her parents were looking for her, where the police were looking for her to get his cigarettes, of all things. This shows that he was not thinking clearly and rationally. This shows that he was still in a very clouded mental state. So cool reflection, meaning like he could not reflect on what he had done. He wasn't making sense of everything. The whole idea that he killed somebody, then soaking wet, obviously missing for a while, shows up at the crime scene. So basically the doctor's saying he clearly did not grasp exactly what he did.
Gotcha.
Which I don't know if I believe.
Well, he does have a lot of mental disorders, so...
He does. Dr. Dean's assessment concluded that at the time of Casey's killing, Johnny was experiencing significant mental or emotional turmoil. This turmoil substantially impaired his ability to comprehend the criminal nature of his actions or adhere to legal standards. His mental state was characterized by extreme emotional disturbance, influenced by the auditory hallucinations he was expressing, and persistent delusional beliefs that clouded his consciousness. This is what she testified to. Confined in the Missouri Department of Corrections, Johnny Johnson reported being raped by another inmate. A week later, Johnny was put on full suicide watch and started self-destructive behavior, such as cutting himself, swallowing a tube of toothpaste, attempting to peel the skin off his arm, as well as smearing feces and urine all over his cell. The jury returned a verdict of guilty on all charges against Johnny Johnson. During the penalty phase, the jury recommended a death sentence for the murder charge, agreeing with all three statutory aggravating factors presented. Consequently, Johnson was sentenced to death for the murder conviction, along with consecutive life sentences for the other crimes he was charged with, because he was, quote, a persistent offender, and that would be, kidnapping and assault. Just last year, on Tuesday, August 1st, 2023, shortly after the U.S. Supreme Court rejected a request to block the execution over arguments Johnny Johnson was mentally incompetent, Johnson, now age 45, received a lethal injection dose of phenobarbital at the state prison in Bonne Terre, Missouri. He was pronounced dead at 6:33 p.m. Johnson had written a statement to the Department of Corrections expressing remorse shortly before being put to death, saying, quote, "God bless, sorry to the people and family I hurt." Among those witnessing Johnny's execution were several members of Casey Williamson's family, as well as the former prosecutor and the police investigator who handled the case. And that is the story of that sweet little 6-year-old baby, Casey Williamson, here in Valley Park, Missouri. I know I mentioned this to you. I was living in California at the time. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about this. Yeah. I was just, shocked.
I remember it vaguely, not any of the details. I remember it kind of happening.
If you're from around this area and you were here, I don't know, maybe you may or may not remember, but I think this was pretty controversial because it goes back to, should a mentally incompetent person be put to death? And I mean, they did make it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, who did finally reject it and say, nope, you gotta go.
I mean, if anybody would fit that, I would think he would. I mean, he really didn't have a chance in life, to be honest. I mean, it doesn't excuse what he did at all. He's still a monster.
He should have been in a mental facility probably for life.
Right.
Or at least he had no adult figures in his life. Oh. I mean, he bounced around and, mental illness is nothing to mess around with. And you got to stay medicated. And then, I think the shocker for me on this was that Casey's mom and dad knew him since he was a little boy. So, of course, you trust him around your kids. They had 4 little kids, I don't know.
You just can't trust anybody, to be honest.
Well, and you do if you've known somebody forever. And the day before, they were watching cartoons together. And he assured her mom, Angie, that no, she's not a bother. She's great. We're just watching cartoons. Mm. How could you foresee the very next day he's going to steal her and brutally murder her? Awful. Absolutely awful. Did you hear about this case? Were you familiar with it at all?
I did hear about this case, but at the time, I was just so wrapped up in my life that I didn't pay as close attention to it as I should have. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
And I commend the parents for being good parents and raising, just because the parents got divorced, they're still trying to raise their kids together with grandpa and, right across the street. You think you have a series of good things set up to protect your children. You just don't know that person that's going to harm them is in your inner circle. And that just left me with he had been there eating barbecue with them the week before. The whole family. I do want to say that I watched the interrogation of him and I read the court transcript, and he kept saying, have sex with her. And we all know. And that's why I kept saying, quote, his words, not mine, because I don't want anybody to think you cannot have sex with a 6-year-old. Do you see what I'm saying? The police officer finally did correct him. And I was like, thank you. During one of the interrogations.
The media still will write that too, that he had sex with a 16-year-old girl. Mm-mm. No, he raped her. You can't consent, They'll say a 16-year-old woman they had sex with, but then they'll say an 18-year-old boy.
It's funny how we all know. Come on now. Yep. Just depends on what's going on out there. So anyway, that just broke my heart. I commend her parents. I don't know how you could ever come back from that. And I just don't. It's terrible. So
it's my worst nightmare. I'm telling you.
It's just, I don't know. It's terrible.
Well, good job. So to lighten things up a bit, have you been watching anything?
You're so cute, Jen. Of course I've been watching stuff.
I know. I just didn't want to say.
I can't even think of anything right now because it's all the time.
Well, everybody's talking about Baby Reindeer. That's like the big thing. I really enjoyed that. I watched that too. I was trying my hardest not to binge it, but once I got after the 4th episode, which was absolutely horrifying, I couldn't help myself and I binged the rest of it.
I binged it all last Saturday. Yeah. All of it. So that's how I roll, of course.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating story, and there's lots of questions as to what compels people to do what they do, and I would say that's on both sides.
For
both
stalkers,
parties.
Yeah. It was
the stalkers and the gentleman.
Yeah.
Right? The main person.
I have a lot of questions, and I wish I could sit down and speak with the main character. For those that don't know, it is based on true events, and a man who is trying to become a comedian is being stalked by a woman. It's something. That's all I can say.
And once you think it's weird, put your seatbelt on. It's going to get a lot weirder.
And he said, the main guy who wrote this and what happened to it, or the person that this happened to, He said he tried his best to make the woman not, so she couldn't even recognize herself in the piece. But, of course, people being people, they have found...
Hello, Internet.
Yeah, they
Hello,
found this woman.
All of 5 minutes to find her?
I know. They found this woman, and basically they found her just by scrolling through the guy's Twitter.
Yeah.
It seems. Now people are kind of stalking her, which amazes me. People have to leave other people alone.
After you watch it, clearly you know she has some mental health issues.
Oh, yeah. And that's part of, I can't even I don't want spoilers, but that's part of the reason things happened the way it happened, because she does have mental issues. But I can't believe people are just so...
They are. The internet has made everybody...
They're so stupid. The
internet has made everybody believe that they can say or do anything because it's not face-to-face. Everybody's brave when they're behind a keyboard.
Unreal.
It is an unreal story, too, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's about the human psyche, and I wish I could watch it with a psychologist and they could explain everything, why everything happens. And I think he tries to do that a little bit, but it's not good enough for me. Like, I really... You know what I mean?
I don't think he really knew. And for those
that
don't know,
so either.
The person that it happened to, and I believe wrote a book that this was based off of, is actually he plays himself in the Netflix series. And I didn't know that. So I watched the whole thing, because I like to do that sometimes because I don't want to get down the rabbit hole in the middle of it. So I watched the whole thing. Then I researched it and I was like, whoa, really?
Yeah.
Because then I went on a BBC interview with him and the actress that played the stalker.
Oh, and she's fantastic.
Oh, she's so good in it.
She is so good.
It's so good in it.
It's like Jess Goodenberg or something like that. I don't know, but she's so good. I want to go back and look through her other stuff that she's done, because she's an amazing actress.
And he said in the interview that he knew he wanted her for that part.
Yeah.
Period. And and it worked out. So.
Oh, she was good. She was a good part of creepy and approachable, and she was perfect. She really was.
She was. So you need to watch that, people, and then drop us a line and let us know what you think.
Yeah. Another thing I'm watching is Hulu, Under the Bridge. That's another story based on true events about a murder of a young teenager up in Vancouver.
I haven't started that. Should I? Should that be next?
Because it's weekly. So if you want to binge it, you can't.
Yeah.
Which I thought, when things drop, usually it's like they drop the whole thing. So I started it. And I'm like, okay, let's go to the next episode. And it's like, no.
Oh, wait.
It's a weekly thing. It drops every Tuesday.
Also, let me say, speaking of dropping every once a week, the Jinx 2, I watched that last Sunday. It came out, and then the new one comes out tonight. Wow. Just wow. The whole thing is wow. For those of you that don't know, if you haven't, the Jinx on HBO is truly some remarkable filmmaking, shall we say.
Robert Durst.
Robert Durst. He is the son of the rich real estate tycoon from New York City. 3 people disappeared / died. He continued to remain free and went to court. I'm not going to say too much if you haven't watched it, but
you can. It's been out for so long.
It has. Part 2, just the first one dropped last week, and they're kind of picking up for now. He's in custody. One of my favorite lines from the detectives is like, there's 2 kind of people in this world when they get arrested. You get the one that shuts up and doesn't want to say anything. Then you get the one that will talk nonstop. Robert Durst is the one that talks nonstop, and he does. It's almost like he can't help it. So I would advise watching that. But again, it drops once a week, which I do not like.
Yeah.
I prefer to go out all the time.
Yeah. Another one you told me to watch was Ripley. And while I absolutely adore Andrew Scott, I love him.
Cutie Pie?
Love him. I can't watch it. I tried. I just can't get it. But you know what? I didn't like the talented Mr. Ripley.
Oh, maybe
I didn't like
that
either. It wasn't. I remember seeing that movie and everybody around me raving about it, and I'm like, I didn't like it.
Not so much. Yeah.
No.
It's
good.
It's...
I liked it. The cinematography was great, but I couldn't even get halfway into the first episode.
Oh yeah, I watched. I didn't finish it yet, but I've watched.
Andrew Scott, he's Mary. I can't even say it. He's Sherlock.
Yeah,
and Fleabag. He's great in Fleabag. Have you seen Fleabag?
I don't think I have. No, I have not.
You should watch Fleabag. Fleabag's good.
Okay,
I liked it.
Okay, talk me into it.
It's good. You like
that
it.
Was hard. Before we go, do you want to tell our good listeners anything?
I don't know. Do you?
Maybe a little trip or anything?
What trip?
What trip? Jen, I don't know if you know, but our True Crime podcast is going across the pond. Not this summer, but next summer. We are going on vacation, and we want you to come with us. I can't think of anything more fun or more miserable, depending on if you like us.
It'll be
going
fun.
on a little. I'm just kidding. Going on a little vacation. We're booked. We're ready to go. We do have a few more seats left, and then after that, the bus door
very
closes.
few. There's a chance that we could open up for more seats, but I don't think we're going to. If you want to do it, you need to book ASAP. We have a small, minute, like maybe 2 seats left. And we might not, it's no big deal if we even fill those seats, but we're just saying that they're open if anybody wants to. Other than that, they're gone. No more. But yeah, it's going to be fun. We're going to go to Scotland first, hit up all the cool things to see in Scotland, do a little ghosty tour, go in the underground city that they have there. Then we will go to York. And like some of the buildings are from the 1300s, which
that's amazing to me.
Floors me. I can't comprehend that they're still standing, considering what we're only 250 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
The United
we have
States
buildings
is.
all the way back from 1970.
Right. And then we're going to end up in London, where we're going to go see the Tower of London and all the Queen's Ravens and whatnot. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a blast. I wish it was sooner. I wish it was this soon, this June instead of next June.
And we did think about that, but we thought that wasn't enough time to really plan it out.
I couldn't gather up enough money to do it. Yeah. You know what I mean? So we wanted to give everybody enough time to get situated, get their passports that they'll need, and it's going to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of ladies that I know that are going that are going to be fun. There's a couple gentlemen that are also flying along with us. It's going to be best
friends. I can't wait.
And everything's included. I think the only thing you really have to pay for is like a couple of meals here and there, and then souvenirs, right? And then like liquor, if you want liquor at night. There's going to be a dinner will provide you a couple glasses of wine or beer, whatever you want. But for the most part, just like some meals and drinks.
Breakfast
and
every day.
Souvenirs. That's all you're going to have to pay for, out of pocket. Everything else will be paid for by the time you step on that plane to go over to Scotland.
And let me just brag on it. We are calling it the Dark History Tour with our True Crime podcast. So if you like a little history, which I love, a little ghosty stuff, which I love,
little murdery stuff,
this is for you. And let me just brag on Jen and I. This is a trip that no one else can take. This is something that we literally booked these and said, we want to go here, then we want to go here. The only thing we said, we don't care if we went to London first or Scotland first. And York was in the middle. And that's, that's the only thing. Otherwise, this is not a trip that you can find anywhere else. And as far as I know, we are the first podcast.
We actually called around to different tour companies and said, this is what we want to do. And a couple of them said, nope, you have to take these tours. And we're like, okay. And then the third one we called and we're like, we want to do this, this, and this. And they're like, okay, we can arrange it. You can do whatever you want. We'll set it up. You tell me what you want. We'll get it going. And that's what we did. I'm kind of happy with it. It's going to be...
I'm very happy. And I kind of like that because I don't like to stress over plane flights, buses, changing and
getting
going
to and from the airport to the hotel.
Going sightseeing.
Yeah.
Like we're going to be in a group. We get to go to the front of the line because we're in a big group, right? So that's a major... I just don't like standing in line and I don't like heat. So.
And we're going to have a tour guide that knows the country. And so we won't end up getting lost on our own, Well,
unless you want to.
Well, yeah. We do have free time in each city that we go to. So if you want to go through York and do it all on your own on some hours, that's what you do. You're not chained to everybody. You have time to get away from people.
We're not going to be in that little rope in kindergarten where we all have to hold on to the bar so we all don't get lost.
It's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. I've been talking to people. They've been DMing me about the tour, and I've been getting to know them, and they're lots of fun. And if anybody else that's going on the trip wants to DM me, or if you want to go on the trip but want to talk about it, you don't have any questions, DM me, and I will totally answer questions. And in fact, if you are going on the trip and haven't DM'd me, do introduce yourself and let's get to know each other. I think we are going to do some kind of Zoom meetup or something so everybody can get to know each other before we go.
We're going to do a couple of those actually before, just so that everybody's comfortable. Any questions? Because People will have questions that somebody else hadn't thought about, but then will inevitably have that question again. So, money exchange, all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's going to be fun. We're going to have a great time. And like I said, there's only, I think, 2 spots left, maybe. I haven't checked in a week, so
unless Brad Pitt wants to go, then I don't.
Then we'll open up for more.
That's right.
But as of right now, we're closing it down. Just
Brad Pitt,
got a couple
you can
more
call
people.
me.
We want you to come and
reach out to us on the X, formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah.
On our website, Facebook discussion page. Yeah.
Gmail, our True Crime Podcast at Gmail. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But yeah.
That's it, Jen.
Come with us. That's it. That's all I got.
It's going to be super fun. But until next time, remember, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya.
Today's episode was researched and written by me, Cam. For more information about this episode, as well as all the sources I used, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by hosts Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from October Pod VHS. Our True Crime Podcast is executive produced by Nico Vertesi and Dick Vane. Make sure to like and subscribe to Our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter at Our True Crime Pod. You can email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. If you really like the show, make sure to check out our Patreon at Our True Crime Podcast. Our True Crime Podcast is an OTC production.